Ahead of time. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I thank the A4M and the organizers for this opportunity. Yeah, it works. And also we're getting behind and everyone wants to go get their stamps, so I appreciate your attention. I am going to talk today about influenza virus infection. We're switching gears from the last topic, of course. It seems to be the way this conference works with all the different topics. It's very timely to talk about influenza. Of course, we're right at the beginning of our annual flu season, and not coincidentally, I just realized this when I was double-checking some statistics on the CDC website, that you may not realize that it's National Vaccination Week this week, and yesterday was actually National Healthcare Worker Vaccination, or Bring Your Vaccinations to Work Day, or something to that effect. And I will talk a little bit about the influenza vaccine, age-associated decline in the immune response to both vaccination and an acute infection, and nutritional interventions. Just to add on to the introduction, my name is Barry Ritz. I have a position, I wear a few hats. I have a position as Director of Scientific Affairs for Atrium Innovations, but I'm also a Research Assistant Professor at Drexel University in Philadelphia, where I maintain a nutritional immunology research laboratory. And that's really the basis of the information that I'm going to provide to you today. Our goal is to understand the age-associated changes in immunity that enhance the severity of influenza infection. We'll talk a little bit about past and current flu seasons and the topic of avian influenza, pandemic bird flu. We'll discuss emerging research, and by emerging I mean my research on natural killer cells and immunosenescence, as well as nutritional interventions. So again, in terms of the research that will be presented, I'm going to talk specifically about 3 studies, all of which have been published, all of which are my own, and they're on the topics of natural killer cell dysfunction with aging, caloric restriction, which might be a phenomenon that you're familiar with, and also as an example of specific nutraceutical supplementation, active hexose correlated compound, which is a mushroom extract. So I'd like to start with a discussion on why it's important to study influenza virus. And I'm going to use an excerpt to set the stage. This is from the book The Great Influenza by John Barry, which talks about the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1919 that claimed 50 million lives worldwide. Influenza was about to become interesting, for the virus had not disappeared, it had only gone underground, like a forest fire left burning in the roots, swarming and mutating, adapting, honing itself, watching and waiting to burst into flames. Over the next year, it flourished. It killed more people in 24 weeks than AIDS has killed in 24 years, more people in a year than the Black Death of the Middle Ages killed in a century. So pandemic flu certainly provides a certain level of interest in the study of influenza virus, and the recent emergence of highly virulent H5N1 avian influenza has brought the topic of pandemic flu back into the spotlight. Because it remains unknown whether vaccines can be produced quickly enough to respond to an outbreak of avian influenza if it becomes highly transmissible from human to human. Antivirals may not be effective. In fact, there's lots of data already suggesting that there's a good bit of resistance. And in my mind, the concept of pandemic flu and our potential inability to deal with it through typical intervention argues for a need to better understand the immune system and a broad-based approach to strengthening immune function in general, especially among the elderly, against virus infections. So this is a table actually that I compiled a year ago, so it's starting to become out of date, on the number of the country, then the number of human cases of avian influenza, and then the number of deaths. And the point to make is really that this is a highly virulent influenza virus. It produces over 50% mortality. Now, as I said, I do need to update this because just looking at the Indonesia numbers, there were 79 human infections when I made this table. And just on Monday, December 9th, the CDC reported the 138th and 139th cases of human avian influenza in Indonesia, a 2-year-old that passed away and an 8-year-old that survived. And still, we have this high amount of fatality. Of the 139 cases in Indonesia, 113 have been fatal. But in addition to pandemic flu, I argue that just the regular old flu is an important public health concern as well, and something that we need to study and understand. Flu comes from the Latin, or the Greek, I think, for influence, because it was believed that epidemics of seasonal flu have been around for millennia, and it was believed, because we didn't understand immunology, etc., that this was the influence of the gods or supernatural influences that once a year sort of punished you with influenza. We now know, actually as a direct result of the Spanish flu and advancements in immunology, that a virus, the influenza virus, causes the flu, and it results yearly in about 200,000 hospitalizations, 36,000 deaths, 90% of which occur in the elderly, those age 65 and older. And influenza, seasonal influenza, and related bacterial infections are the fourth leading cause of death in the elderly. All of this is despite vaccination. So we have very good vaccination programs. It's National Vaccination Week. But still, the elderly are highly susceptible to influenza mortality, even with vaccination, or despite vaccination programs. And part of that is that the elderly do demonstrate a reduced antibody response to the vaccine because of altered immune function. This is further compounded when the influenza vaccine isn't readily available, which happens from year to year, or when the vaccine isn't really properly prepared, meaning that it's very difficult. It's a very difficult job to predict what strains of influenza will be circulating in the community the next year.